Welcome to our Grace family. I'm beginning to get used to the regulars who are every day responding to the program that we are doing, and I just love the interaction. I appreciate your comments as well. And even if you have a disagreement, you're welcome to share it so that I can know how I can again address your situation that maybe you are not clear with. But remember, everything I say, I will always take you to the text, and I will always deal with the text in context. It's very important. So I've been trying to get to the point where I'm trying to show you, can a believer fall from grace? That's the big question. And the text I was reading for those who join us today, and I believe people are beginning to share and tell others to tune in, is Galatians 5 verse 4, where Paul says, you who want to be justified by the law, you have alienated yourself from Christ, and you have fallen from grace. And I looked yesterday at the background of the book of Galatians, but I want to again just touch on chapter 1 verse 6 of Galatians, where Paul, remember I told you, is writing to the Galatia churches who were Gentile descent believers. They were not Jews, they were Gentiles. They were not practicing Judaism. But Paul is saying to them in chapter 1 verse 6, I am astonished that you are so easily turned away from the gospel of grace to another gospel. This is where the key comes, when you have to look at the whole book contextually. He is saying that they have accepted another gospel that is not even a gospel. So the question then is, what is Paul calling another gospel? Because if he say it is another gospel that is not even a gospel, then it means it's not the gospel. But he calls the gospel of grace. He says, I'm astonished that you so easily turned away from the gospel of grace to another gospel. So this is the context of what happened. After Paul gave them the purity of the gospel of grace to the Galatia churches, on his missionary journeys, you can go study it for yourself, Judaizers came in and they said to these believers who have received the freedom of the gospel, because the Bible says it is for freedom that Christ has come to set us free, not to yoke us, not to put us in bondage, in religious bondage, in yokes, in do's, in don'ts, but he came to give us life and not religion, and life more abundantly. So now Paul is calling it another gospel. What does he call another gospel? Judaizers came in and told these Gentile believers who have received freedom in Christ, they said to them, Christ is not sufficient. You must add to Christ. It is not Christ or, it is Christ and. So you must add to Christ, observing of days, circumcision, Judaism, the laws. And so after they have received the freedom of the gospel, they now load them with laws and regulations and put them in bondage. So how does Paul address this now? Paul is saying to them now, remember I quote 2 days ago, Galatians 2:21, I do not frustrate the grace of God. The grace of God cannot be frustrated by sin. I'm going to say it again. The grace of God cannot be frustrated by sin. Because I'm trying to get to my main question for this week. Can a believer fall from grace? So now I'm saying to you, the grace of God cannot be frustrated by sin. Paul says, I do not frustrate the grace of God. If righteousness came through the law, Christ died in vain. The grace of God can be frustrated when you try to make yourself right with God in any shape, form, or fashion. He goes into chapter 3 verse 1 and he says, oh, ye foolish Galatians. You have to look at the text now in the background I've created so that you read the text in the proper context. He's now saying to them, oh, ye foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? He's actually saying to them now, because you have added to the gospel, because you have embraced another gospel that is not even a gospel, he says you are bewitched. Strong words. He goes into chapter 10 verse 1 because of time and he says these words. Whoever wants to operate under the law, he says, is under a curse. This is powerful. Whoever wants to operate by the works of the law is under a curse. Now, this is where the context is unfolding. He tells them they are bewitched. It tells them they're under a curse. He comes into chapter 4, 5, verse 1, and he says, now, stand firm in the freedom with what Christ has set you free, and do not again be entangled in the yoke of bondage. He comes into chapter 4, in verse 4 of chapter 5, and he says, whoever wants to justify himself by the law has alienated him from Christ and has fallen from grace. So the question is, what makes a believer fall from grace? That's the question. The question I'm dealing with is, can a believer fall from grace? And what makes a believer fall from grace in the context of what Paul is dealing with? My time is up. I'll be back tomorrow. Keep telling your friends. Let me keep hearing from you. We are on this grace journey together, and we are going to find our freedom and liberation in the face of Jesus Christ. See you tomorrow. God bless you.